Welcome in, everybody, for another episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, and my co-host, as always, is the digital content editor of Bassmaster.com, my guy, Kyle Jessie. And we have a special guest today because this episode is the August Pattern of the Month segment. We've got our guy, Josh Douglas. He's from part of the country where it's great to be there, maybe 12 months out of the year for some people, but August, September, that's probably the best time of the year to be up north because it's way cooler than down south. So Dougie, we appreciate you jumping on from your great fishing conditions to share some knowledge with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, man.
Kyle, we talked about it a little bit on the phone and whatnot, but August, I mean, it is a tough month to fish, especially where we live in Alabama and Arkansas. It is one of the most brutal things. I think I saw Lee Livesey in Texas post a video of surface water temperature 106 degrees where he's at. So it is absolutely brutal in the South. And that's why we always go north for the Bassmaster Elite Series. And I'm excited to talk to Josh. I know that when we talked together that you admire Josh, not only his journey in the Opens, but his other, professional career with FLW getting started, and also just being such a good northern angler. Like there's a lot of good info that Josh shares on his stuff about fishing all times of the year, but especially this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from somebody that, like myself, that's not experienced a whole lot of northern fishing, it's obviously going to be awesome to get to hear some insight from Josh on that. And, something that we've talked about before in August is you're talking about different parts of the country are nearly polar opposite in certain ways. I mean, this time of year in the South, obviously a lot of those fish are so broken up and it's like you're fishing for more individual fish. I'm sure we'll get into it. But then, in August and Josh's part of the world, this is, a time where I imagine they'll group up and things start getting right. So I'm looking forward to getting into it with Josh and yourself.
Well, Josh, you're up in Minnesota. That's where you live, and that's where you've spent a lot of time, and you may have moved around the country and experienced a lot and traveling in your camper and whatnot, but Minnesota is home. And that is a place that you have cut your teeth, especially Mille Lacs. And Mille Lacs is one of the best smallmouth places. So when you think of August, you can give us a southern approach, but I want to hear what you have to think about northern fishing for smallmouth on a place like Mille Lacs or a place like St. Clair. What is the first thing that goes into your mind when you think August smallmouth tournaments?
Yeah, definitely. August, to be brutally honest, I love fishing in the South. I really do, especially when we're frozen up here because it's pretty miserable in the winter. But yeah, I don't get excited to go down south in August and September. But in Minnesota, things are good. Talking like Lake Mille Lacs in particular, kind of a little bit different deal. Honestly, August can be a little tough. It's maybe our toughest month because let's be honest, they're ice capped for most of the season, and then all of a sudden it's like a smorgasbord for 4 or 5 months. But August can get a little bit slow, and the only reason why that is because we have bad algae blooms on those super clear glacial style lakes, like what Mille Lacs would be. Mille Lacs is basically a smaller Great Lake. If it was any bigger, they'd probably call it one and be a lot closer to them. So generally those fish, smallmouth have extremely good eyesight. They can see things, really small baits from really far away. And right now we kind of get that algae bloom. And the reason for that is we have a lot of abundance of bait when it comes to perch. We don't have any shad. So it's kind of an equalizer in Minnesota. Everywhere else we go, to New York, St. Clair, all that still has shad. We don't have those. We also don't have gobies because we're not a true Great Lake. So they are about 98% crawdad eaters, except for when we have a little bit of the little perch fry and mayflies. Of course, we get a lot of a lot of different fish fly, mayfly hatches, and we're kind of all coming off of that at the same time. So it's the hottest it's going to be. And when all that stuff dies off, we get big time algae bloom. So it kind of makes the smallmouth revert back into a largemouth a little bit. It's a little too early for them to get out deep in those big schools. By the end of the month, I think we'll start to see that. Or if we remember in those AOY tournaments they had here mid-September, boy, they were whacking them. Those fish were in a lot bigger schools. The water had cleared back up. You get those cooler nights again, and that'll kill that algae bloom off. So right now, the smallmouth are kind of more largemouth mode. You're talking about a fish that can see so well its whole life. And for a 2, 3, maybe 4 week period, you can't even see the rocks in 2 feet right now. That's how dirty it is in the water. Not dirty, algae. So those fish kind of they can't use their eyes as much. Now they have to revert back into being a largemouth. So maybe going shallower or sticking tighter to cover rocks. You're not going to see them floating out on your active target and stuff like you will all the other times a year. And but at the same time, they're still looking for crawdads. You know, they're eating up on those perch. Generally, everywhere I go fishing, I want to find the bait, right? I want to find the shad and stuff like that. With smallmouth up here, a lot of times I don't want to be around the bait. If I can see all that perch and stuff, it's going to be harder to get bites. And being that they're not quite in big schools yet, and you don't have that competition for the food source, you know, you're talking about onesies, twosies here and there, bouncing around. Really, you can run good boulders, good rock piles like I would brush pile fishing down south this time of year. You know, you fish 20, you catch 1 or 2, and at the end of the day, you should still be over 20 pounds.
So Josh, talk about this a little bit. So obviously when you talk about southern fishing, you can kind of, you know, track the fall migration, if that's what you want to call it. But August is so early, you know, to call fall in the South, but you kind of hit, I mean, it's not even remotely.
It's still like 100 degrees. Yeah.
But,
It's crazy.
Dog days of summer. Yeah.
Right. 100%. But you know, you kind of hit on it there. Obviously, all these smallmouth fisheries up north are so good in September because those colder nights, things start happening. Talk about the, you know, smallmouth specifically, what that looks like what that transition starts to look like from, you know, early August all the way into, you know, September. Like, where do those fish start moving? Do they stay in the same places? Kind of, what do you think the fish do from August till September, you know, when it gets really good?
Definitely. They're definitely going to start to move offshore more. They're out there, you know, they'll scatter like everything else, but what they're going to start doing is they're going to start schooling up in really big schools and then feed up for winter. They're not dumb. They've been around 20 years. Those 4-pounders are 20 years old. You know, they got their progression that they do, their seasonal progression they're going to do all the time. As that water starts to clear up, those fish are going to get really big schools, and you know, they're going to eat crawdads. And then the other little thing, the little deal we got up here is we have alewives and or Cisco, and they're going to spawn in the fall, which is I think shad. I don't even know. No, shad spawn in spring, obviously shad spawn. But they shad in the.
But they're a bait fish, so they're not shad.
They're a bait fish,
and
they get big,
fish.
And that's why we have big muskies and stuff like that. But they kind of stay out in the mud really deep. There's nothing out there for a smallmouth. That's kind of walleye water, but they actually get in on the rocks and on the sand real shallow in the fall. So you're going to also have that progression there where those bigger fish are going to start to kind of start keying in, and that's when I start throwing a minnow bait a little bit more, the swim bait and stuff like that. Not big swimmers, but you know, 4-inch paddle tails, stuff like that are going to start to rule roost. But at the same time, you know, in my opinion, when you can find it, smallies don't want to travel, you know, a long distance one direction. They just want to go north and south. So if they can get a nice sunny day in September when the water starts to drop, then they'll jump up shallow, you know, just like they do anywhere else. And you can look for them, you know, calm day, sunny, but then they don't want to like travel a long way to do that. They just want to slip off of a hard edge and then drop back down into that deeper water on those more colder days and frontal days that you start to see in the fall. But the key is the progression out and how these reefs as I call them, you know, basically the glaciers came down and cut a bunch of the earth out, and then they retreated, you know, slowly over thousands of years. When they did that, they left random rock piles in the middle of the lake everywhere. And as you start to follow those reefs out, you're going to start, you know, get out to the very tips, the very ends of the points, the very ends of the reefs, those dramatic drops close to the mud. That's going to be where they're going to want to winter. But the key is they're going to get in, you know, 50 fish schools, 100 fish schools, stuff like that, and getting really big groups.
Right.
One thing that Minnesota has, and for a couple years there, basically when everyone got off the Mille Lacs hype train, I would sneak up there every fall, and I would come and stay in the ice huts when they're up on land, which by the way, is one of the coolest things right down the road from Dougie. And one thing that I would experience is the boulder fishing, but also you guys have even smallmouth lakes like Mille Lacs, and then you obviously think about Minnetonka down in the Tri-Cities area and things like that. But you guys have boulders and you have grass, and you can have some of those situations where you're on one end of the lake and it's totally, you won't see a blade of grass, and the other end of the lake has grass, but they're the same species, but they're probably going to be wired a little different. What's the grass look like from August time period? Obviously it depends on how the winter went, but like do they start to, with that algae bloom, and they maybe go a little shallower? Is grass going to hold them a little more, those lines where rock and grass mix? And also I'll say, I don't think you guys have much brush or wood around there, but do they ever get up shallow enough where any of those, I guess they're like fossilized wood. I don't know what Zona has a term for it, but St. Clair, there'll be like a stick, stuck in the sand, and fish will gravitate just a stick. Do you guys have any of that where the grass seems to dominate at times over just boulders?
Yeah, sure. And this is a great time to attack the grass. And actually, Mille Lacs, compared to like when you all were here with the AOYs, we have more grass in it than we ever have, which is also accelerating the perch. We're starting to get way more perch back and stuff like that. But again, like I said, the smallmouth will revert more to a largemouth because they can't see as good. So they're going to ambush things. So they'll run, I don't necessarily catch them in the weeds, flipping the weeds or nothing like that, but they will definitely cruise those edges. The thing about it is, you just can't necessarily get on a school that you can say, oh, these are all 4+ pounders. You're going to fish for them, and you're going to fish in that area, and you stay in there all day. One's going to be a 2-pounder, one's going to be a 12-incher, and then a 5-pounder. You just can't necessarily do that. Boulders, for sure, they're always going to hang around boulders, but we have a ton of rock spines, and boulders are good. There's no doubt about it. But when you get, I'd every day of the week throw away one big boulder for like 4 mediocre sized ones in an area. Those are going to be better, and they're going to reload a heck of a lot easier. And your average Joe can't find them or doesn't pay attention to them like they do a Volkswagen that they like the idle buy type deal. If you can follow me. So
sure.
It gives them something. And you got to think when they're ambushing crawdads, one rock is going to be good, but if they have a bunch of that jagged stuff, or similar to like Lake Ontario and stuff, you got these big cuts in the glaciers where they cut away and you get those little drops. Those are going to funnel fish, and it's going to hold them a lot. And they're definitely, we don't have like sticks. I can't say I do much. Maybe boat docks still. Boat docks.
Yeah, they can get up shallow enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll be amazed how big a bass, smallmouth will get under those boat docks this time of year. Yeah, nothing, water, a little Cinco underneath there, and all of a sudden you got a 5-pounder screaming out of there. But again, they're just more largemouth like. But as soon as that water clears again, expect them to go back into their normal, which we are, a couple weeks away from that.
Well, and Kyle, I don't want to cut you off, but just to follow in on that, is a lot of those places that do maybe have a congregation of docks or a marina, it seems like it is either naturally or man-made it's cut out a little bit more, or just the natural boat traffic in and out of those areas. They'll create little edges or just a little things like that. But that's just some stuff that I noticed just fishing Mille Lacs a couple times, is how, yeah, you can get shallow. You can find that mix of rock and grass. I like to call them great guide spots. You were saying that. I was thinking about a spot I catch 40 in a row with Cody Huff one year, and they were literally like a 4-pounder, 2-pounder, 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 4-pounder. And you're like, you would have fun with people who've never caught them before, but we were trying to get to more, get our baits back out there for 4s. So it's interesting that you say it like that. But yeah, there seems to be, and I think in the AOI tournament, the first time we were ever there, Brandon Polinick, Matt Herron, some of those guys, when 360 came out, they found what they called like the dinosaur spine. So instead of having the best boulders on the lake, they had like the rows of them, that spine, as you called it. So Kyle, I was sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to follow up on that because it kind of clicked in my head.
No, you're perfectly fine. So something I've always admired, I know Ronnie and I have talked about it before, is every month you do a what's on the deck segment on your Instagram and social media and things of that nature. And obviously we're always going to talk about baits. So let's stay up north, because I'm sure we're going to transition down south at some point, even though if you're up north, who wants to transition down south right now? But give me your top 3 baits for targeting smallmouth in the August month, and then your top 3 for largemouth, because although Mille Lacs may not be known so much for largemouth because people fish for smallmouth, obviously there's a ton of lakes in Minnesota, and I'm sure you do a good largemouth fishing this time of year as well,
especially when it blows, like windy wise.
So top 3 for smallmouth is going to be a drop shot. And that can vary as far as the bait goes.
Sure.
Whatever, but that presentation of being able to dead stick it, maybe go with a little longer leader and stuff, try to get those fish that are a little bit weary right now to bite. They might look at it, turn away, come back, eat it type stuff. 100% a Ned rig. A Ned rig is just so versatile. I tend to use, when it comes to Mille Lacs, I tend to use more crawdad imitating versions of them. That Biosmart has an exonet, a Sakoshi bug I've talked about a bunch. It just looks like a crawdad. That is what they're eating. But I don't think a TRD will definitely get bit too. They can't tell that's not a crawdad. And then I'm gonna have to. So those are probably staples. I want to go with a little tube, just because they're all crawdad. But I'm actually gonna go with a top water bait. Probably something that walks really, really hard against the surface. The Shimano World Pop is a really good one because it does walk so hard against the top, has a lot of flash to it. Or something like an Evergreen SB or a Spook even. Again, because you're talking about fishing up shallower and they'll come up and blast it. And Mille Lacs ain't always the best lake for topwater because we don't have shad, so they're not looking up all that often. But with the more presence of perch, and then just St. Clair, Oneida, any of these other lakes, I would definitely be throwing a topwater.
Before you move on to largemouth, well, Ronnie, I don't know what you were going to get to, but I did want you to hit on this. I'll give you an opportunity to knock one out of the park. I'm going to set one on a tee and let you knock it out of the park. So I just did a boat tour here recently with you, and you explained to me the Ned head that you use, the perfect Ned head from Outcast. Talk about that a little bit, because I feel like with what you just explained, that head is really important for what you do. And I was just listening to the audio the other day that I got from you, and I just feel like that's, something that needs to be talked about, that bait standing up like a crawdad.
Yeah, definitely. So if up here, we have what we call a jig worm, and we grew up, guys like me and Seth and stuff in Austin grew up throwing a jig worm. So when the Ned rig came out, we were like, it's a jig worm. We've been doing this for forever, right? But
it's a non-weedless shaggy head. Yeah,
exactly. You started playing with it, and the more and more you heard of people catching them more, and then you try to just throw your jig worm, and that wasn't exactly getting the job done. So we started playing with Ned rigs more. Well, there's a very big key why a Ned rig gets bit so much. Largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, doesn't really matter. They all like it. But everything, take a shaky head and it falls, it hits the bottom, and then it falls like this. Okay. Once companies like Z-Man and 10,000 Fish with the Sakoshi bug with their Stretch X plastic and the whatever Z-Man calls Elastec.
Yep.
Once they incorporated that plastic, now you have a bait that falls and then pops back up in their face. Okay, not another bait that I know of does that.
Without you having to do anything, without you having to make it.
Right. It just dead stick it, and all of a sudden. So then the fish just weren't used to it. You're also talking about a downsized package, perfect for finesse fishing, which is how it was originally made. I think in like the Ozark, Ned Katy and the Ozark Lakes and stuff like that. Great for smallmouth. You're talking about a small package. As we took the bait and started using it more and more, the key was in our the Outcast money jig. That was what we all used for the jig worm. It had a good hook in it. You didn't lose fish. It caught fish on Lake Minnetonka and all across the north. So we wanted to incorporate that. But the problem is as we started to power fish. So when the Ned rig first came out, it was, a 16th was kind of big. It was like really light stuff. And I'm sure you guys know most professional bass fishermen don't like screwing around too long with stuff that takes forever if they don't have to, right? We want to power fish something if we can. So as it progressed, we were looking for bigger baits than what they had, bigger heads than what they had, so that I could still target, a rock pile in 22 feet, 23 feet. And they're not up here, they're down there, and they're eating crawdads or gobies, and you want them down on the bottom. The key was when everybody was making a Ned rig, they made it was the original Ned rigs, and the ones we all mostly know, and it was squared. It was almost like a puck, like a hockey puck.
Okay? An aspirin, yeah.
Exactly. So what I found is I started playing with that in fish and on my like my tub and stuff like that, and trying to figure out what it was about the bait. Well, I noticed that as I have people make me custom Ned heads to fish deeper, as they got bigger, they start turning into more of a block. Well, then the bait falls, and the Elastec can't do its job, and it can't round over the corner. It want to just sit flat. So now you're back to just having a jig worm again. So right away, talking to Seth and stuff, who's very good at designing baits and thinking outside the box and stuff like that, it was, we got to make this thing round, like a round head. And then we played with that, and then it would kind of wobble around. So we just put that little tiny flat spot at the end so that thing would just sit there buoyant in their face. And what you ended up getting was a really, really good hook, which is half the reason why they're $5 for 3 of them, because the hooks are expensive. You know, we didn't make them to be value. We made them to try to win tournaments on, and that's how the perfect Ned head came. It does have my name on it. But again, there was a lot of very, very good fishermen that had a say in how that bait was designed and brought to market, and it is a good one. A lot of people, if they say they're not using it, they're probably lying to you. It's a good one.
Well, they had to put your face on it because you had the nice beard, and back in the day when you designed it, Seth still had no mustache and looked like he was 15 years old. So they had to do that. Yeah. What I was gonna say, Kyle, I'm glad you asked about the Ned and his jig head or his Ned rig, because I was gonna ask, when you said you may lengthen the leader on your drop shot a little bit, that is something that isn't talked about enough when it comes to people trying to learn how to drop shot. Tying a drop shot's one thing, but I've done it before where I'll like tie one up. You know, when I was first doing a drop shot, I'm like, is this thing long enough? Like, is this, the brush pile 6 feet tall, but why is my leader this big, or why is it this big? You know, easy to, you know, varying the leader when you're dropping on them versus casting to them. So what is a normal length for you? And when you say a longer than normal length, what would that be? When you, or shorter, like go through that from what's your standard to then if you just.
So if I was to just rig up a drop shot, getting like Oahe, we're heading to Oahe, right? I don't know. I've never been there. I've done a little research online of what I think the forage base is and stuff like that. So I'll probably start with like a drop shot with a 10-inch leader, something like that. It's pretty much my standard, you know, something like, drop shot. I've seen at places like Lake Erie when they're super duper keyed in on gobies. You know, you want like not a lot, because a goby doesn't have a swim bladder. It doesn't swim like this. It just hops off the bottom. So you want a really small one. At the same time, I didn't learn until I had an active target, which that's my biggest thing about forward facing sonar is, do I catch bass just looking at them and targeting them Patrick Walter style? Sure. There's definitely do. You every day, you know, but it's what you can learn. What I thought I knew and what I thought the bass were doing and what they were actually doing has pushed me into a whole nother realm, because now I'm not guessing so much, right? So now this particular time of year is sometimes you want to buy time on a cast. Okay, you can throw your bait out there and give it to throw it at the fish, and you want that maybe, you know, maybe I want to throw a wacky Cinco at them in 20 feet because that's what they'll eat right now, but I can't possibly sit there that long all the time and wait for that wacky Cinco to get down there. And that's just not realistic with big waves like we have on these types of places. So now you're talking about, you know, maybe doing a wacky Cinco on a longer, or just any bait that you want to, a little swim bait. You know, that was my other bait that I was going to throw in. There's a little swimmer. But if September for sure, I'd be all about it. You know,
counting
what I mean?
It down is a lot harder than seeing it down.
Yeah. It is. You can throw it down there because you still want it on the bottom, and then you can kind of let those fish do what they're going to do, and they're always going to show you a predatory response. You know, they're going to come and look at it hard. Another one's going to come and look at it, and then they're going to decide they don't want to eat it. They're going to go away, and that thing's still sitting there, and it drives. And one thing about a smallmouth is they're gamers, man. They want to play. I'm convinced even if they think and know you're fishing for them, which I do think they have somewhat of a capability of knowing that you're trouble, you can still talk them into biting because they just have a really, really bad attitude. Sometimes and the main key is, I don't know at times if there's anything more deadly than dead sticking a bait and letting it just sit there. You heard Taku say it when he won last year, you know, don't shake it, let it sit there. How long can you let it sit there? It blows my mind how much these guys that I fish against now, how long they can let a bait sit there. But that's key to talking a fish into biting, because you're, you know, 98, 99% of your bass fishermen that are out there targeting don't got the kahunas, if you will, to sit there and let bait sit there that long. So that's why I'd like that leader, or super clear water, same as people in the South would use a Carolina rig and want to really stretch that leader out because the water's getting really clear. The fish are a little bit more finicky. It's the same mentality when you're using a drop shot. It's just playing with that leader length, and you'd be just amazed when you play with it that there's not a right answer. ever for it. And that's what makes a good fisherman good, is the ability to change with things, especially during a practice, and figure out what's they're getting the bites on and what they're not getting the bites on.
What I think is interesting is back in the day, which is still can be the case depending on where we're at in the tournament, used to be who can make the most casts in a day. It was kind of like, this is a tough sport. I can make 2,000 casts in a day, and a regular Joe's making 500. I'm covering more water. I'm getting in front of more fish. And now with forward-facing sonar and other technologies, even side imaging back in the day, down imaging sonar, whatever, it was, I don't care if it takes 5 minutes. It's going to be what's the most efficient cast. Some guys will now sell out for 50 casts in a day if they know that cast is going to result in a catch. So it's interesting
100%.
how we've done that. I'm still over here chunking and winding about 6 inches of water. So
yeah,
whatever. But
there's multiple ways to win tournaments. For sure.
Yes, I don't think Greg Hagney's doing too bad. Yeah.
No.
When Josh mentions most people are willing to just cast and move, I was going to say Ronnie's willing to just throw a chatterbait 365.
Yes,
so,
or a frog. Hey, I love it. I'll do it. Yeah,
we're most people.
Speaking of that,
100%.
tell me your 5 or your 3 baits for largemouth lakes, because I know there's a bunch of little ponds, as we can almost call them, since you guys have 10,000 lakes, and I think y'all cheated the system a little bit on what you call a lake. But I've been to a lot of those little ones. They're like, "Where'd you go today?" I don't even know the name of it. Like is the two connecting roads near the ramp. Like I don't know what the lake's called, and so. For largemouth, when you do sneak away and get out, you're not guiding and you're just trying to snatch a few. What are your go-to largemouth in August?
Yeah, definitely. In Minnesota, you could say something like, "Oh, I went to Round Lake," and my next question would have to be, "Well, which one?"
Yeah, are you describing it, or is it the name?
No, there's probably 6 or 7 Round Lakes and Deer Lakes and both.
You
know what I mean? But again, this time of year, we are technically in our dog days of summer. So, your dog days of summer are 2 months. Our dog days of summer are probably 2 or 3 weeks. So it just happens a little quicker. We're technically in that. So the grass is about as thick as it's going to get, because now by the time we get back from lacrosse, I'm already planning that I'll be bundled up in flannels and stuff back out on Lake Mille Lacs, but it's been 90 degrees almost, 80, 90 degrees almost every day. So technically we are in our dog days, and a lot of the schools in August are starting to split up. They were on those hard, and everything just happens quicker. It just happens faster. They spawn in May and June. They post-spawn in the end of June, July. Boy, they're all up out on the rock piles and stuff like that. Deep largemouth fishing, rock spines like Minnetonka, stuff like that. And now they're kind of broken up a little bit, but they're seeking cover, I think, is the key that I look for this time of year. So I'm going to look for matted vegetation. You got a lot of, like, as the weeds start dying off, the wind blows it into the cattails and stuff like that. So I'm going to be looking for matted stuff. So that's going to be either a frog or a punch rig, something like that. I'm definitely going to be skipping jigs under boat docks. Again, cover from the sun, looking for a lot more individual fish. And then, I would also maybe throw in like a deep crankbait for those ones that are still out there, DT16, something like that, just because, they've seen a lot of pressure. So I'm going to try to get that reaction bite. But again, for the key is for right now, I'm going to start reverting shallow, figuring that they're starting to already know that, I hate to say it, winter's coming, fall's coming, stuff like that. And they're going to be using that stuff.
To be gluttonous in a minute.
So a lot of frog fishing, a lot of punching, and stuff like that for sure is kind of what I do this time of year out there for largemouth fishing. So a jig, a punch rig, and a frog, I think you're pretty set up.
So let's make the dreaded move down south and talk about that a little bit. So obviously, this time of year, it becomes bizarre. And Ronnie and I have talked about this a handful of times, just chatting about fishing. In August down south, it goes from, June, even July, a lot of, schools of fish, and those schools break up. And a lot of fish go shallow, with the bluegill spawn still happening a little bit on full moons, things of that nature. The funny thing is there's really not a lot of, southern tournaments in August, but we had the opportunity to watch you fish the Forestwood Cup on my home lake of Lake Hamilton. And I'll just read you the weights and you take a guess. I know you'll know exactly what place you were in. and just give everybody else a chance. This is how tough it gets in the South. 9 pounds, 12 pounds, and 5 pounds. Where would that land you, Ronnie?
I mean, out of a 50-person field, I mean, I'm surprised the person made the cut, but I know where Josh was, and I think he was like 8th place or something like that.
9th, which just goes to prove, like
made the final day. That's crazy.
It's not easy. Fishing,
what did I have? 9 pounds and 12 pounds got me into the final day.
9 and 12, 9 even and 12 even got you in the final day.
Did he catch a limit on that? Did he catch a limit all 3 days?
The fourth day had 4.
Oh, okay.
Third day,
4 for 5. Yeah,
third
day.
Sorry.
I had 4. Yeah,
4 for 5.
Third day. So all that point getting to is that fishing in the South this time of year is brutally tough. Not just based on the weather, not just based on how miserable it can be, but just the fishing itself gets tough because it seems like everything's really spread out. So talk about, like, in your experience fishing in the South in the heat of the summer in August, kind of your mindset of how you approach lakes, and then after that, later on we'll get into maybe your top 3 baits for fishing in the South in August.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I would told you a few years ago, I'm definitely not the one to ask, because that's why I didn't get into the elites as soon as I did under the 3. If it would have been, the new format, all 9, that, or fish all 9, it would have happened sooner.
You would have been here to get an invite to another league back in the day. That's how long ago you would have made it.
That's right. And because being a dude from Minnesota, I struggled heavy when this time of year happened in the open schedule. This is when I would fall apart and lose all the momentum that I had. I'd start fast and then I'd fall apart. I have no problem. When fish are shallow pre-spawn, I love that. Obviously at Douglas Lake last year, I took 3rd fishing deep before anyone else was doing it, when everyone else was shallow. Love that. I had a Chickamauga top 10 early in the season. Good. Always felt good. Fell apart in the fall and couldn't figure it out until the Forest Wood Cup. Actually, I started idling around and looking for brush piles. I started treating southern lakes like they were my lakes back home. And if I can take a big lake and make one cast, that's what I want to do. That's how I'm going to do that. I do not like running down the bank with a buzz bait or with a crankbait and try to catch them. I like doing it for fun. I hate trying to be that guy. And I just got my butt kicked for 10 years in the fall because I wouldn't do that. Then you look at like Rayburn. Rayburn was a grimy tournament. I whacked him and almost won that tournament. I idled offshore and I looked for brush piles for 4 straight days. And then I just ran as many of them as I could a day. And you look at that one, that was really a grimy tournament, unless you were one of the top 10 guys. At the end of the day, we were catching 20 pounds every single day doing it. So that's what, and then even how I got into the elites last year at Lake Norman. I knew it. I've been there long enough. I knew that I do not like running into a pocket, seeing one guy on that bank and another guy on that bank. And I just don't like that. I just don't fish well. I don't fish confident. So instead, I just idle all day long until it's time to go fishing. And then I run those. And, that's my little tip for getting into the elites. I think it's a great avenue to go. I know nothing about making a brush pile. Not a damn thing. But I am very, very good at sniffing out yours. And finding where people put them. And then that's kind of like my game. Now you're talking about something that I feel like, man, if I can end up with 50 of these, I'm going to catch 5. And that right there is the key to fishing in the South this time of year, is catch 5 a day. And you are going to cash a check every single time.
He basically had 9 pounds, 12 pounds, and 5 pounds in that Norman event as well, except when he got a little Southern in him. And he went up shallow and flipped the dock and caught like a 5-pounder.
That was still a brush pile,
but it was up by a dock.
Yeah, I idled, dude. I had game piles.
You could reach the bank with a cast.
I knew I needed a top 10 to get in. I showed up. I gave myself like 6 days to idle offshore, and I idle. I once I felt like I freaking idled the entire lake or whatnot. And see, that's another key too. Is like I've just learned over time to not stretch my waypoints out all across the lake. Once I know I'm starting to fish this, Then I'm going to start connecting the dots to and from the boat ramp and start working that way. But that fish, those were brush piles that were planted on docks and stuff that I was just sniffing around their boat docks, waving to the folks, having barbecues and stuff, and trying to bump their dock and look around at it and stuff like that. And, I just reverted away from the cane piles and went shallow to catch that big one. But I was also feeling pretty good. Ronnie had already told me I was in the elite. So I was like,
man, he ran my data limit up on that day too after the weigh, and he's like, "Do I have to catch a bass to make the elites?" I'm like, "If you finish 10th, you're in by a point." And
I didn't want nothing to do with having to fish 6th, 7th, 8th, none of that. I don't even care if it was just don't finish 10th and you're in. That is like, I wouldn't have slept that night and all that. So yeah, come that third day, I was like, after halfway through, I was like, why don't I go be a thorn in David Williams' side and go mess around in the back of creeks and stuff, right? No, he's always catching bass. And who did I see as soon as I get back there?
Yeah,
we both watch each other catch a big one. So yeah, that would be in the South, super duper tough. This time of year, I would probably be looking around for brush piles and stuff that are going to hold an abundance of bait, and it's going to hold a dominant fish, because dominant fish hold down that brush pile and stuff like that. So or same as I would do up here, I'd be attacking, if there's grass, I'd be attacking matted stuff and grass, because they're going to be there, or boat docks. That would be kind of my main deal. And then maybe we're not quite there yet. You guys can tell me, maybe it's next month. But a buzz bait early in the morning is always a great way to catch a limit, or maybe just one kicker that you're going to end up needing at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
It'll definitely put a few in the live well at minimum, and hopefully a big one. And I will even say, and Kyle can probably back this up, even noon, when you don't think you should catch one on a buzz bait, like in this, even when the hottest point, because in the South, it seems in August, the bait forage, it's almost like it's not the turnover, but it seems like the bait happens before the turnover. They're like, we're going to start moving shallow, and then so fish will end up trickling there. So even in the middle of the day, you'll see that, and it's crazy. Like, I think Cole Huskins got a top 4 at Norman throwing a buzzbait all day, and it got better in the afternoon. But I wanted to, since we have 2 elites left on the schedule, and they're both in August, and they're both vastly different. We've talked about smallmouth and largemouth. Do you have a kind of a mental game plan on attacking 2 opposite bodies of water almost back-to-back weeks for the desired species, most likely?
Yeah, I do. Oahe, I don't know nothing about, and I don't think many guys do. And even the ones that went last year, I don't know if it's true, but Carl told me it's down like 22 feet or something nuts. Like
Wow.
The reservoir is really low. It's just been a drought through here for the last couple of years, which is not familiar to here, but it is a smallmouth factory. I'm expecting big weights. I'm planning to catch big weights. I do think, I don't know if it'll be anything crazy, but it definitely could. So I think we're going to blow the doors open on Mobridge and open up a lot of people's eyes to what is way out there in South Dakota, if you're willing to. But like I said, that's still 8 hours away from my house, like everything is, or 24 hours. So, one of these days, hopefully I'll see Minnesota pop up on our schedule, and we, just stay close to home. But I'm expecting that to be a good fishery. I'm expecting us to need to be able to catch big weights. I do think, paying attention to the last elite tournament, watching some of that on YouTube, I think we're in a better situation going out of Mobridge to be able to catch them a little bit better. And so
and if weather gets bad, weather's going to kind of be the thing with, it's not straight up and down like a Finger Lake in New York, but the way it points, if you get that streamlined direction, went north or south, you can't hide out there. And that's what's different for people who don't know. I'm not telling Josh anything he doesn't know from research, but there's just going to be smallmouth, because I don't even know if there's a piece of wood laying on the sand, for largemouth. So
I'm not targeting them. If somebody brings them in, that's great. But then again, I'm not targeting them when they're smallmouths out there. I'm very seldom targeting largemouths anyway. I'd rather fish for smallies. You got to think, coming off the western mountains and all that of the Rocky Mountains, you're on not there, but you're coming off of that. And basically, you're in what the North would call the desert. Up there, there's some massive thunderstorms that come through there.
Had one during the tournament last year.
Yeah. Hopefully, we all get 4 days of full fishing in, and then the weather's a factor. I do know that the waves grow really big and mean there. Anytime you have any kind of current and planes and nothing to break them, we're going to have big wins. But I am kind of looking forward to it because I don't feel like people know it that well. Like you look at me, I know I'm a rookie, but I'm not a rookie when it comes to fishing tournaments and stuff like that. At the same time, the schedule's tough on a rookie when you look at these guys have been to Lake Fork every year. They've been to the St. Lawrence. That was my first time on Lake Ontario. I've never been to Pickwick. You know what I mean? There's certain Sandy Cooper. I've never been there. There's St. John's. I go every year. I've never been there. So it's kind of like a uphill battle when you're a rookie. You're just, you got a lot to go off of. So I'm kind of really excited to
there's only 2018 like is the most recent.
A little bit of it, and I don't even know of one before that. So I'm guessing this is a little bit more of an even playing field, if you will. And don't get me wrong, I know Harris Chain really well, and that's the one that is kicking my butt from being in. I know I'm on the classic bubble right now, and if I like Harris Chain was the one I thought I'd do well. I usually top 30 at the Harris Chain all the time. I caught the crap out of them. I just never caught a 4 or 5 pounder. And that's what's dragging me down. So that's not an excuse. You can know, the better you know a place, the more bad decisions you can make too. So
it's because I put you on my team for fantasy fishing.
Now I'm going to be. I don't want to see that no more. But anyway, I just expect big things at Oahe. I've always wanted to fish there. I'm excited to go out there. I know they have really big bass. Lacrosse. I haven't generally done too well at lacrosse. I don't know it extremely well. I fished a couple FLW events there in my career, and that's it. I fished 2 events there. Now I did win, my first major tournament was a Bassmaster Weekend Series tournament on pools 4 and 5, which are up north, a little further up. I'm guessing
Wabash or something.
Wabasha, yep.
Wabasha, sorry.
I'm guessing that it's going to be a grind. I don't think the Mississippi River is going to be as good as what the Bassmasters have known from the past. I think during the COVID time period, there's not, we do have 13,000 plus lakes, but they're definitely not by the river. So the river is more of a classic reservoir, like what you see throughout the South. And the fact of it's a river, but people have to travel, you got one reservoir and then you got 200 miles to your next reservoir. So it just gets hit. And when everyone was fishing, I think that it got pounded. The last few years, there hasn't been a ton of water through there. I know it's going to be low unless we get some big storms or something that are going to lift it up that have to come north of it. They have to be up here by my house to really flush the system. And then we're also not talking about the best smallmouth time of year to be on the Mississippi River. And then you also have to consider hardcore locks. Now, these are locks that they don't give a crap if you're Brandon Polinick themselves, you're not getting through that damn lock if they have business to do on those locks. So I just am telling you guys for last tournament of the year with everything, all the marbles on there to get into the classic and everything. I think this one's going to be a very nervous wracking one for all of us anglers there. Even if you're sitting pretty good inside that cut line, I think you have a lot of decisions to make in that tournament, and but at the same time, it's going to be a fun event. It's going to be a fun one to cover, and there's going to be they're telling you there's going to be a lot of drama at this one. There's going to be I don't know, just the bite, just everything. If somebody's got the kahunas to chase smallmouth, that can be a ghost fish this time of year.
We saw Seth do it, when he made his name, and we've been there since then. And it's, and it was one with largemouth and mats and dogweed and all that stuff. So,
it's just going to be a lot. There's just going to be a lot to consider. And then with the low water, it is not a nice place to run around. Sandbars can stop you in a quick hurry, leave you there watching your weigh-in time go by, stuff like that. There's just a lot of variables in the last one of the year, so I'm expecting to see a lot of fireworks around that for sure.
Playing it safe, Kyle, it sounds like maybe could gain somebody some points, maybe, but we've also seen the places near the ramp, that get pounded sometimes produce. So we'll keep an eye on that. Last thing before we let you go, if Kyle doesn't have anything, I'm gonna drop one for you. I've been to Mille Lacs, like I said, multiple times in the fall. maybe not August, but within the next 3 weeks, of August ending, I would be up there at some point. And I think I went 3 years in a row, and my dates varied by a week, or when I went on the same week, the weather had it, a week earlier, a week late. And it seemed like I would run waypoints of boulders that I had found and caught fish off of. And I would maybe have caught smallmouth on these 10 boulders. And I go back the next time 1 week earlier or 1 week later, and I'd catch walleye on every single boulder. At what point for you with 1,000 boulders, how many will you run until you know that they're just not in that depth of water? They're not in 15, they're in 11. And how subtle, because it is naturally formed. There are some hard drops and things, but it's a lot more of a Okeechobee style bowl at times, to where it could be subtle. It could be a foot, or like you said, it could be a Volkswagen rock compared to 3 little ones. And how that subtlety of depth can just be 1 week difference from finding the best smallmouth of your life or finding dinner on your plate.
Yep, exactly. So the benefit for a guy like me living across the street from the lake is, you got to assume everyone who comes to a place like Mille Lacs, they want to catch bass every day. Okay. That's what they want to do. They don't have the time on a Saturday when they finally get away from their kids and stuff, and their family, for a quick deal, to idle the lake and mow the lawn back and forth looking for everything that they can find. I can go out there any given time for 5-6 hours, idle around, never make an entire cast. I'm just looking for stuff. So I have the opportunity, unlike you did. You have to fish those same rocks.
I'm like, Dougie, give me a rock, please. Like just 2, like one at one end of the lake, one at the other, and I'll start.
Right. And I always say God's got a great way of protecting his babies. It's really hard on these big, giant glacial lakes to just move around. You have to have water in every corner of the lake, or it's just going to be too windy to possibly get to them. So for my sake, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot quicker, because I can fish one in 22, I can fish one in 18, I can fish one in 15, all the way up to 5. And I can run around and I can do that, and then dictate really quick what I think that they're biting on, and then run that pattern. I have hundreds and hundreds of them that I can run. At the same time, don't let that be a discouragement, because right in here and now, that might be a decent way to go ahead and catch bass. But you are also talking about big schools coming here, and you said September when you like to come. Now's the time. That's going to be the time to be ignoring that kind of stuff, and you're going to get your butt kicked. That'd be like me. I was trying to run around on Ontario, and I did a little bit of everything, but Jay was sitting on a monster school and just making us look stupid in a quick hurry, because he can just sit there, get to those fish, and just catch them all day long. And I would have to run. A guy that wants to fish boulders has got to run around and try to fish those rocks all around the lake, and the elements just aren't going to always let that happen. So I would really, in September, I would start looking for more schools, and I think that's where you find stuff like what Keith Combs was doing, as opposed to what Seth did the first time. I knew the first time they went there that Seth was probably going to win that tournament, because he just had way too much knowledge of it. Come that second time around, he still had a good tournament, but at the same time, you got guys like Keith Combs thinking outside the box, throwing a big football jig and stuff to schoolers, and running away with that title. So numerous ways to do it. But yeah, just like anything, and I'm guessing if we're talking the South, if you're running brush piles, you start in 25, and next thing you know, you're in 8, and then you kind of figure out which ones are going, and that's where you're going to start to lean to the rest of the day, is targeting that depth range.
Awesome. Well, we asked Dougie for 20 minutes of his time, and he gave us 45. Very good teacher of all things smallmouth. Josh Douglas, like you mentioned, 53rd in Angler of the Year points, just a couple spots. I mean, that is 10 spots. What am I
going to need to do, Ronnie? You tell me what do I need to do in the next.
You know what? Go get you 2 cuts, and it'll be what it'll be. But get inside that top 47 and get better on day 3, whether it's 5 spots or 25 spots, but just make it to day 3, and it'll be what it'll be. But you were just outside of that in the 20 pound a day club you were one of the 8 guys who had 20 pounds day 1 and 2 combined on average and missed the cut. I don't think that was necessarily going to break your heart in the next 2. But yeah, right there on the classic line. I'll let you know what you need to do after Oahe, and
Okay.
it might be don't get stuck, or it might be go catch 13 pounds a day. One of those two things.
Well, I'll shoot for my first elite top 10 at Oahe, and then we'll leave it at that.
Yes, and then you'll think about winning Rookie of the Year. That'll be the next thing. So,
actually, yeah, let's do it.
He's still in the contention for that, Kyle. But for everyone joining in on the Inside Bassmaster podcast, we appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't yet, with all the info he's given, follow Josh Douglas on all of his social media platforms. Also on YouTube, we'll have it tagged above and in the description. Give Josh a follow. For Kyle, Jessie, I'm Ronnie Moore. That's Josh Douglas. Thank you for joining us on the Pattern of the Month episode for the month of August, aka the dog days of summer.